Hey gang, happy Monday, Microsoft Monday, or it's actually Saturday when I'm taping this, or maybe you're watching this. Anyway, Microsoft Monday. Today we're talking about Excel, and in particular we're talking about a really cool feature that allows you to create and use drop-down menus that you select and identify. It's called data validation, and let's jump right to it. We're going to go into Excel. The screen's going to get a bit messy for a second, but that's okay. And we have a basic list that's on the screen right now. What we want to do in column B is place in there 4 different levels of experience: beginner, intermediate, advanced, and master. Now we want to do this to make sure it's always spelled properly, so the tallies are always correct, and that nobody goes rogue and tries to put a 5th level when we're not using that. To do that, we want to create a data validation list. Here's how. Start by selecting column B. We want it for the entire column. And by the way, anything you've already put in that column will not be applicable to the data validation. We'll go to the data menu where we are already, and toward the right side in the data tools group, we're going to select data validation. And now what we're going to see is 3 different options, 3 tabs: settings, input message, and error alert. Let's start with settings. This is the most important one and really the one you need to use first. Right now, Excel will allow any value in here, which makes sense. You can put anything you want into an Excel worksheet or an Excel cell. But if you drop that down, you can see a whole list of options, whole numbers and decimals and lists and dates and times. You can choose what goes in there. For the most part, at least when I've used Excel over the years, using a list is the best approach, or the most frequent approach. So I'm going to put list in here, and now it's asking me for the source. And there's 2 ways to do this. I'm going to show you the way that I think is more accurate 100% of the time, and that is by typing what you want in this list, separated by columns. And please don't misspell anything, because how you put it in here is going to be how it appears. So I've typed in beginner, intermediate, advanced, and master as my list. I'm going to click OK. And now you're going to see in B1 there is a drop down, and that drop down has the 4 different options we just created. So let's go to cell B2, and that drop down appears again. And I can just go to the drop down and choose whichever one I want to put in there. Fantastic. We've created a drop-down list. Now I also have another approach. I can delete that and I can type in the word. That's great too. But here's the real advantage of doing this, is if I type this in and misspell it pretty hideously, it's going to give me a message. And it says the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for the cell. You put the wrong information in there. Cool, so I could retry or just cancel. And so data validation step 1 has worked. And anytime I want to change anything in that cell, I can just go to the drop down or type it in there. We know I'm not advanced, I'll go to beginner there. Okay, step 2 on data validation. Again, up to the data menu, again over to the data validation icon, and now we're going to go with an input message. And this is really useful if you're working with other people on a spreadsheet. So the title is here, is going to be experience, and we're going to put a message in here as we want it to appear anytime any cell in column B is selected. So I'm going to say please enter. Spelling always helps. Enter. Boy, this is going to be tricky. And I'm going to type it in here, and you do want to make sure the spelling is right. And then when I click OK, watch what happens in the cell in column B, which already is selected, is that pop-up will appear with exactly what you put in there. Experience as your header, and then what you want them to enter. Really cool, really useful when you're working with people who obviously don't have the same level of knowledge of what needs to go in there. By the way, what I forgot to tell you there is you really want to also select the entire column before you do that. So because I made that mistake right here, what a surprise. Okay, so we're going to erase the settings. We're going to go into data validation again. The title is going to be experience. Maybe I'll cut all this out and not make you watch it all. We don't know. It depends what I want to do here, but we get this back in here: intermediate, advanced, and master. So there we go, and now we have that anytime this pops up. Now, believe it or not, what just happened in the entire process is it got rid of my initial validation. No harm in going over things again. We'll go to settings, we'll go to list, and we'll type in beginner, intermediate, Don't you like seeing how people make mistakes all the time on all this stuff? I don't know why that happened there. Okay. But we got master, we got all that happening. Cool. Let's see if I actually got this done right at this point. So I click in B2, there's the drop down, and we can change that however we want. Cool. We got the first two done. Took us longer than it should have, but you'll do it a lot quicker than I did. Last thing we want to do here is, again, select the column. Again, go to data validation, and now put an error alert, something warm and fuzzy when you're working with somebody else to let them know that they made a mistake that they perhaps shouldn't have. I don't know. I always put stuff in that makes them feel good when they make mistakes, you know? So we enter that in there. We click OK. We go to B2. I type in beginner all sorts of ways with 3 N's. And when I hit the enter, voila. Error message pops up. Maybe you don't want to put it in that way, but you get the idea. And now we can just reselect whatever we want in there. There's one more approach I want to talk about before we leave, and that is, instead of typing in the words, pulling from a list that you already have. And if we look over to the right side of the screen in column N, I have beginner, intermediate, advanced, and master in a separate list. I put it in yellow only because I wanted to stand out, not because that's necessary. And we could tell Excel to look at that list. And let's do that, and let's just talk about one of the pitfalls of doing that. So again, select the column, data, data validation, and at that point we go back to the settings and we allow a list, but the source this time, instead of the words we typed in, we're going to use this collapse dialog box. That always allows you in Microsoft to shrink this box and then be able to use your cursor to select something without having to complete the action by hitting OK or cancel, at least immediately. So collapse dialog collapses the dialog box. What a unique name for it. We're going to scroll over to the right to go to N and select N2 through 5. We're going to select those cells like you would for summing or creating a product of different cells within your worksheet. We'll hit that collapse dialog button one more time. We will click OK. And essentially what we've done is the same thing. We've created a collapse dialog box. We've created, I should say, a drop-down validation list, which allows us to choose anything that's in here. Here's the challenge. When you tie a data validation to a list, as we'll go over to column N, and you accidentally change what's in one of the cells, in this case, beginner, let's say I accidentally hit erase and delete. I don't even realize I did that. And now we go back over and we try to put beginner in. It says it in the text here, so that must work. So let me type in beginner, and I'll spell it right. And well, there you go. You get the message that you don't want to get, right? There you go. So tying it to a list isn't always the best thing, because if you change the order of the list, if you accidentally delete something, or if you're rearranging the order of the sheet, you're sorting or filtering, it may take away what you want and intend to do. So let's get back to the camera here. So that's data validation. It allows you to provide a drop-down list anywhere you want in Excel. By the way, if you use Google Sheets, you can do this as well, so it is applicable there. I like using it, again, for large lists that I haven't started entering the information in, because it does make sure that the data I'm putting in there is accurate. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day, whatever day you're watching on, and I'll see you again soon.